In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. You are watching Hadi TV. You can see our email address on your screen. We would be happy to see your questions and answer them. Following the previous programs, today we are again with Dr. Effatusadat Merghati Khoui. Welcome to our program again, Doctor. Before we start our main discussion about sexology and the related principles, I want to brief you what we talked in the previous sections. Miss Khoui, could you please help me in this brief discussion?
Okay.
Thank you very much. We talked about some of the Islamic doctrine principles in which we said human being differs from angels, human being differs from the animals in the field that the God, the Creator, give us both thought and instinct. Is that correct?
Of course.
Dr. Marghati Khoui, yes. And we differ. So we have thought in order to, we have the power of thought, power of decision making. And then by these two, we can control ourselves, control our instinct, beside the animals who cannot do such a thing.
That's true.
And we said that, if I'm correct, we said that we live in a social context, and this sexology and the related principles and notions is related to the context in which we live, to the society.
Socially constructed.
Yeah.
That's true.
And we said Quran also talks about it and has so many verses based on these principles, Islamic principles, which was the main discussion
True.
of this program. So our discussion get to the construction of the society and the related notions. Today, we want to talk about some of the other fundamental principles and some guidelines, which reported by the world, not just Islam, in other field, in health education maybe, and other magazines, because you are a specialist in this field, I would be happy to hear you about
Well,
this.
thank you very much again for inviting me for this program. You briefed the viewers very well about what we talked in previous sessions. And actually, we talked about theories and principles basic for human beings and how they are sexually created, and they're sexual beings, we have to be careful about the sexuality matters related to human beings. And you nicely briefed that how they can think, and they've got power of decision making, they can take responsibility, and they can handle their own behaviors in all aspects of their lives, specifically about sexual lives, because we've got some ethical codes and limitation in our sexual behaviors when we're living in Islamic societies. So we have to be careful of these limitations, ethical codes and morality. We already actually talked about these issues in detail, but today, as you asked me to focus on, is the place of sex education according to Islamic principles.
Not just according to Islamic principles, Doctor, according to whatever have done in the world, in other cultures, in other contexts, or as a science, as a science of sexology, what had been done. And are they related to Islamic principles too, or no? They are some kind, some
Confliction?
Yeah, that is.
You're looking for confliction between practical guidelines, which is published or reported around the world.
That is.
Because there is, again, discussion and hot debate about this confliction, that whatever is in the world in terms of practical guidelines can be in contrast with Islamic principles. What I would like to mention, first of all, is at least as a researcher, I couldn't find any confliction between these practical guidelines for sex education, sexual health, and so on, with Islamic principles. If we, as a Muslim, believe that the Quran stresses on getting knowledge. I'm sure you're aware of this verse from Surah Zomar, verse 9, is that قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Are those who know equal with those who don't know? So this is a basic principle for me, at least, and I can interpret in a way that like the rest of Islamic teaching, knowledge about those verses and traditions on the subject is not age specific, and all people are encouraged to get knowledge about whatever is in the world and whatever is actually mentioned in Quran. And that was interesting. When I was searching for this program, I came across with a report in the World Health Organization in terms of practical guideline for sex education. And I compared with what I know from Quran, and I couldn't find any confliction between these two. And I would like to quote from this report that two statements in this guideline inspired me, and I thought, oh God, this is exactly in line with Quran and what I learned from Quran about education and about learning and about getting more knowledge. Not specifically about sexuality, but this guideline is about sexuality. Sexuality education is a lifelong process of acquiring information and forming attitude, beliefs, and values about such important topic as identity, relationships, and intimacy. These three last concepts, I mean identity, relationships, and intimacy, is clearly mentioned and written in Quran, and we can see, and you briefed actually the viewers that how we are human beings and sexuality is part of our identity, and how Quran teaches us to relate with others and to improve our relationship with other peoples, and how we create intimacy between two persons, so-called here wife and husband, or in terms of dating, or and so on, intimacy between child and parents, and so on. You can find all over the Quran, you can read about these three main concepts: identity, relationships, and intimacy.
So are there any talks about these three concepts, I mean identity, relationship, and intimacy, in the Islamic literature?
As I said before, yes. If you look at the Quran, all over the Quran.
Beside Quran, I mean,
Yes.
any research based on these three?
Actually, no, I haven't seen anything, but in some guidelines for spouses when they get married, there are something about how to relate to each other, because, as you know, before marriage, there is no relationship between opposite sexes in terms of romantic relationship. It's not acceptable. So they can talk, and that's specifically advice from Islamic guidelines, and to ask them to talk together and to talk about their relationships, and to get each other to know it, the partner. But what I believe is they're talking about their identity. When you want to choose your partner in terms of husband or wife, you need to talk about yourself and say, who am I? And its identity. And you need to tell him or her, what do you mean by good relationships? What do you mean by romantic relationships? That means talking about relationships. It's not necessary to relate to each other sexually to be able to know each other. We can talk, but we can talk if we know about relationships. If we don't know, if we are ignored and we never talked about relationships and different kinds of relationships, for example, romantic relationships, sexual relationships, so how we can talk about it? from my point of view, it's not the matter of having relationships, acting sexually. It's very important to know about it.
You mean it's the matter of knowledge?
It's a matter of knowledge and awareness.
Yeah.
Awareness about the details of relationships. So we can easily talk to our partner, potential partner actually. When we are in the dating time, there is a good guideline, Islamic guideline, to say that how extent you can go through and talk with your potential partner. And again, about intimacy. Unfortunately, in marital counseling sessions, I can see a client coming to me and they have no idea about these three main concepts. They can see each other from different point of view, for example, economical point of view, political point of view, and whatever you can think in the society. They can talk about everything except good relationships and or exploring these three concepts. Who am I and what sort of relationship I like to have with my previous partner in terms of sexual relationships, and what does mean intimacy for me. So I can see a very, very wide gap in this sort of knowledge. In contrast, while we can see in the Quran and Sunnah that the knowledge is emphasized on, and God's and Prophet, actually, peace be upon him, asks us to be clear about these things, to think of it, and to get enough knowledge, because it's our right to get right information. But I'm sure that you can find all over place in Islamic materials, just encouraging you as a person to get enough knowledge, right information, and to practice this information in your real life. There is no no problem with discussing these issues.
And these are all related to that power of thinking, power of decision making.
That's
three.
Exactly right. That's what actually I was thinking of this guideline reported from WHO, and it's mentioning specifically. And I was thinking, surprisingly, it's in line of Islamic materials to saying that this report believes also that all people have the right to comprehensive sexuality education that addresses the sociocultural, biological, psychological, and the most importantly is spiritual dimension of sexuality by providing information. Information, again, decision making. If you remember, we found in Islamic materials, specifically in Quran, that the God encouraging human beings, people who can think and make a decision. And also the other things is in this guideline, in line with Quran, is a critical thinking skills.
Mm-hmm. What's that?
It's if you look at Quran, all over the Quran, you can see the word like يعقلون, يتفكرون, يتذكرون. That all, to me, that means that when we face with a fact or with a theory, with a concept, we have to think of it. We have to think of it very deeply, and then we can think about it critically. That's what God permits us to do. We are not, but I can't really accept this idea from some of Muslims saying that no, you have to accept exactly whatever is said. It's true about some sort of rules, which is very clear, specific. We have to accept them, but not about the concepts like relationships, sexuality, sort of things, because they there are very general topics. General topics, we have to think of it, and we have to talk about it with the specialists, with the group in theme, and we encourage people to critically think. So that's why we can improve our skills in discussions and all those things. So this is very important, and I was really inspired with this guideline. And also, this guideline had some key concepts. In general, it was saying broad categories of information about sexuality and family living.
And these concepts are all along with Islamic principles.
Yes, it is. As you mentioned in previous session, family is very important institution, and things that the Islam encourage us to think of it and to work on it. Family is very important. Family members must relate to each other in a very intimate ways, and they need to love each other, and they need to know each other. So family is very important. It's no question. In Islamic materials all over place, you can see family is very, very important. And I found these key concepts in this guideline very compatible with what Islamic materials say, so no confliction. And also there is 6 another concepts which I would like to mention the number 6 before everything else. It's because as a social...
Last but not the least.
Yes. As a social constructionist.
And I know that you have so many researches based
Yes.
on this.
Yeah, and this concept, number 6, is mentioning what we talk too much about it. Like sexuality is learned in the society and influenced by culture. So we need to explore and work on sexuality matters in our own context, in the Islamic framework, when we are living in Islamic societies. This is the main things we already talked about.
We talked about these things, but these are not in conflict with those science of sexology.
No, it is not.
I mean that there should be some kind of principles which are the basic or the base for the other principles or concepts.
Yes.
Which related to the society. Yes?
Of course, yes. Some pioneers in sexuality fields, they also emphasis on sociocultural context and its influences on the ways we learn sexuality. That's what the number 6 key concepts of this guideline is saying. Society and culture, social and cultural environment shape the way individual learns about sexuality and express their sexuality. This is a very broad statement, right? But we need to go back to our own societies, which is Islamic society, and see what's the framework of sex education for the Islamic society. That means, to me, actually, that means that we cannot really have a unique prescription for sexuality education, bringing from Western society and applying it in Islamic society. That means we have to work on it and bring it into Islamic framework using all these basic concepts that we already talked about.
Doesn't this culture interfere with those sexology principles as a main? We talked about those customs which were mingled with Islam principles besides sexology, anything. Doesn't it mean that we are going to again mix these with each other?
You're right. Because, there is a lot of traditions and customs mixed with Islamic principles. Again, I can offer a solution for investigating and making clarified this mixture and helping Muslim peoples in society, in Islamic society, and I would like to give you an example from my own work, because I'm working in an Islamic context, within the schools, in the society, and all over places. We've got a project, they're working on sexuality education and puberty for girls. If we want to solve this problem,
Okay, thank you very much for solving this problem. We come to you in another program.
Oh,
Okay,
that's all
Dr.
right.
Merghati.
Okay, no worries.
And thank you very much for your patience and tolerance, our viewers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.